When you live for 102 years, you learn that time is not a straight line. It's a room. You live in it, surrounded by all the people you once were, all the loves you once had. Most people are afraid of the silence in a room like this. They rush to fill it with noise, with new voices, with anything to avoid the echoes. I don't. I have earned this quiet. For 50 years, my life was a symphony with Maria. Her breath was the rhythm, her laughter the melody. When she died, the music didn't just stop. The entire orchestra vanished. What was left was a silence so profound it had a physical weight. My children, in their love, they see this silence as a sickness. They think it needs a cure. They don't understand that after a storm that levels a forest, the most beautiful thing isn't a new tree. It's the quiet light that finally breaks through the empty sky. This peace, this is my final great love. And I find myself in the strange position of having to protect it from the people who love me most. My days are built on small, sacred things. The way the morning sun hits the worn patch on my armchair, the one shaped perfectly to my head. I still make 2 cups of coffee, out of a habit that has outlived the person it was for. I warm my hands on one mug, and I watch the steam rise from hers on the other side of the table. The house is not empty, it's just occupied differently. Her reading glasses are still on the nightstand, a silent testament to a story that was paused mid-sentence. Her scent lingers in the closet, a ghost of fabric and memory. My children call every day. They ask if I've eaten, if I'm warm, if I'm lonely. Their questions are like little stones thrown into the calm surface of my life, causing ripples I don't want. They see a fragile old man who needs saving. They can't see the man I've become, a custodian of a shared universe, the sole keeper of a sacred flame. They believe a new life is a solution, but for me it would be an erasure. It would be a betrayal of the one person on earth who knew every version of me. My workshop in the basement is my sanctuary. It smells of cedar shavings and old oil, a scent of creation and control. Here, my hands, knotted with age, still know what to do. They can take a rough piece of wood and find the shape hidden inside it. I spend hours sanding, carving, feeling the grain come to life under my fingers. It's a quiet conversation with something solid, something real. Each finished piece, a small bird, a polished box, is a testament that I can still make something whole. This is a truth I need to hold in my hands some days. My children don't understand this. They see it as a hobby, a way to pass the time. They don't see it for what it is, the practice of rebuilding. After Maria left, everything in me was splintered. Down here, with my tools and the patient silence of the wood, I learned to put the pieces back together, not as they were, but into a new form. A man who can stand on his own. This work is not for them, or for anyone else. It's for me. It's the physical proof of my own survival. Once a week, I walk to the corner bar. It's a place that has aged with the neighborhood, dark and quiet. I sit with 3 other men. We are all that's left of our generation here. We don't talk much. We don't have to. We've seen the world change and our bodies fail. We've buried wives and watched our children grow into strangers with their own lives. There's an understanding in the silence between us that is deeper than any conversation. We nod when the drinks arrive. We watch the dust motes dance in the sliver of afternoon light. We are like old trees in a forgotten forest, our roots intertwined by shared seasons of sun and storm. This is my social life. It isn't loud or demanding. It doesn't ask me to be anyone other than who I am right now. It is a quiet communion, a shared acknowledgement that we have made it this far. It is enough. For my children, this is another symptom of my decline. For me, it is the most honest form of connection I have left. We are simply bearing witness to each other's endurance. The call came on a Tuesday, the quietest day of my week. It was my daughter, Sarah. Her voice had that careful, gentle tone she uses when she's about to suggest something for my own good, which is another way of saying she's about to move the furniture in my soul without asking. "Dad," she said, "we've been worried." I knew this opening. It was the prelude to the symphony of their concern. She told me about a woman, Elena, a widow from her book club. "She's wonderful, Dad, so full of life." full of life. The words hung in the air, an accusation against my own quiet existence. They saw my peace as a void that needed filling. I wanted to tell her that my life was full enough, overflowing with 50 years of a love so complete it left no room for anything else. But the exhaustion in her voice was a weight I couldn't add to, so I listened, and I heard the unspoken plea. Please, don't make us watch you fade away alone. And I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I said yes. She came to my house the following Sunday. My children arranged it, a casual drop-in that felt as staged as a play. Elena was kind, just as they'd said. She had a warm smile and hands that were never still, gesturing as she spoke, filling the space. She sat in the armchair opposite mine, not Maria's chair, but close enough that her presence felt like a tide rising in the room. She talked about her late husband, her garden, her grandchildren. Her words were like bright, colorful birds released into a quiet, monochrome landscape. I watched her, and I tried to see what my children saw, a new beginning, a spark, but all I could feel was a profound sense of dislocation. Every story she told was a reminder of a life I hadn't shared. Her laughter, a pleasant sound on its own, was a foreign frequency in a house tuned only to the memory of Maria's. I nodded and smiled, a perfect imitation of a man engaged in conversation, but inside I was 1,000 miles away, guarding a sacred, silent room she couldn't see. After she left, the silence that returned was different. It wasn't my familiar, comforting quiet. It was a hollowed-out silence, one that held the ghost of her voice, the echo of her laughter. I walked into the kitchen and saw the 2 coffee cups on the counter, the one I had made for her next to mine. It was a jarring image, a violation of my most sacred ritual. For years, the second cup was for Maria, a symbol. This cup was just a cup, an object for a guest. I suddenly understood that for 50 years, Maria and I built a life that didn't need words. This new relationship was built only of words, and they were loud, and they were constant, and they were trying to fill a space that I had come to cherish as sacred. I went to my workshop and ran my hand over a half-finished carving of a bird. The solidness of the wood was a relief. Here, at least, nothing had changed. But I knew with a certainty that chilled me that the ground beneath my feet had shifted. Sarah called that evening, her voice buzzing with an almost desperate hope. "So, what did you think?" she asked. I could hear my son in the background, waiting. "How do you tell your children that their love feels like a cage? How do you explain that the cure they are offering is worse than the disease they imagine?" I couldn't. The weight of their hope was too much to bear. "She's a very nice woman," I said, and the lie was small, but it felt enormous. It was a door I had just opened, a door I knew I should have kept bolted shut. That night, lying in the dark, a sliver of doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if this peace I held so dear was just the quiet before the end? A fear, cold and unfamiliar, touched me for a moment. The fear of being wrong. So when Sarah called a few days later to suggest another meeting, a lunch this time, I heard myself agree again. It wasn't for me, not really. It was for them. And maybe for that small, terrified part of me that was beginning to question everything. The lunches became a weekly ritual, a new routine layered awkwardly over my old ones. We would sit at a small table by the window of a sunlit cafe, and Elena would fill the space between us with her life. She was a good woman, full of stories about her travels, her family, her late husband. I listened, I nodded, I performed the part of an interested companion. But inside, a quiet panic was growing. Every polite question I asked, every smile I offered, felt like a betrayal of the silence I had worked so hard to cultivate. With Maria, silence was a language. We could sit for hours, our hands resting on the same table, and communicate more than most people do with 1,000 words. With Elena, silence was a void that she felt compelled to fill. I found myself shrinking in my chair, becoming a smaller and smaller version of myself, a polite echo of a man. I wasn't living. I was attending a performance of a life my children wanted for me, and the applause was their relief. The cost was my own soul. The shift was subtle at first, then it became an earthquake. Her language started to change from I to we. "We should take a drive to the coast next month," she'd say, her eyes bright with a future I didn't want. "We could plant some new roses in your garden." My garden. Maria's garden. Each of those we's felt like a chisel chipping away at the foundation of my life, at the monument I had built to my past. I have to admit for a moment, I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think a new person could fill the hole in my life, that new laughter could replace the old echoes, but it felt like trying to plant a new tree in the roots of an ancient one. Nothing can grow there anymore except memories. Her kindness wasn't the problem. The problem was the space she was trying to occupy. It wasn't empty. It was full of a 50-year love, and her presence was not filling a void. It was displacing a ghost, and I was the only one who could feel the sacred thing being pushed out. My children, of course, saw only success. Sarah would call, her voice light with a happiness I hadn't heard in years. "Elena told me you two are planning a trip. Dad, I'm so proud of you for not giving up." Not giving up. As if my peace had been a form of surrender. I would stand in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to their joy, and a terrible cold truth would settle over me. People are more afraid of your solitude than you are. They see an old man alone and they see their own fear of death, their own terror of the quiet end. So they try to fill your life with noise, with plans, with another person, because your peace is too terrifying a mirror for them. They weren't saving me from loneliness. They were saving themselves from having to look at it. I was no longer a father. I was a project. My happiness was a box they needed to check to soothe their own anxieties, and I was suffocating under the weight of their love. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, in my living room. The sun was streaming through the window, catching the dust in the air, making it look like a galaxy of tiny swirling stars. Elena was sitting in the armchair opposite mine, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She was talking about a travel documentary she'd seen, her voice full of a genuine wonder for the world. Then she turned to me, her eyes bright with an idea that she thought was a gift. "Antonio," she said, her voice soft and earnest, "we should do that. We should travel. Maybe even think about living together, to make the most of our time." The words were meant to be an invitation to life, but they landed on me like the heavy final clang of a closing cell door. In that instant, the light in the room seemed to dim, the air grew thick and unbreathable, and I saw not a future of shared adventure, but a cage, beautifully decorated with good intentions, descending slowly over what was left of my life. Her smile was a lock, and her kindness was the key turning in it. I looked at her, this good woman who had done nothing wrong, and a profound clarity washed over me, a truth so sharp and cold it took my breath away. It wasn't her. It was never about her. All this time, I thought I was resisting a new person, a new love. I was wrong. I was resisting my own erasure. The fear that had been a low hum in the back of my mind for weeks suddenly had a name, and it wasn't loneliness. It was annihilation. I realized, with the certainty of a man who has nothing left to lie about, that I am not afraid of a new love. I am terrified of losing myself. The man I am now, this quiet custodian of memories, this solitary carver of wood, he was built piece by piece from the rubble of a great loss. He is the final, most authentic version of me, and to let him be smoothed over, repainted and repurposed for someone else's comfort would not be a new beginning. It would be the quietest, most polite form of suicide. In the silence that followed her suggestion, a silence she was already rushing to fill with details about coastal towns and sunnier climates, the last few months replayed in my mind. Every polite nod, every forced smile, every lunch where I felt myself shrinking into the wallpaper. It was all a slow surrender. I saw my children's faces, bright with relief, and I finally understood. They were not seeing me thrive. They were seeing their own fears put to rest. They had handed me a script for the final act of my life, a role they needed me to play so they could sleep at night, and I had been dutifully learning my lines. Elena's well-meaning plans were not an invitation. They were a final demand to abandon the life I had so carefully, so painfully, rebuilt for myself. Her affection, which I had tried to see as a warmth, now felt like a suffocating blanket, smothering the last embers of the fire that was uniquely mine. It was the tyranny of love, the gentle, smiling insistence that you must be what others need you to be. I knew in that moment what I had to do. The decision was not a thought. It was a physical certainty, like the need to breathe. I had to end this. I had to choose the quiet, sunlit room of my own life over the bright, noisy world they were trying to build for me. The path forward would be difficult. It would involve hurting a kind woman who deserved none of it. It would mean facing the crushing disappointment of my children, who would see my choice not as an act of self-preservation, but as a final, stubborn surrender to grief. The weight of that coming conversation settled on me, but it was a familiar weight, one I could carry. It was the weight of my own life. I would have to stand in the storm of their love and protect my peace, because the silence that would follow, the silence I would have to fight for, would not be empty, it would be full. It would be full of Maria, yes, but for the first time, it would also be completely and unapologetically full of me. I let the silence in the room settle after her words, let it become a solid thing between us. Then I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a solution to a problem my children had invented. I saw a person, a kind person, who deserved the truth. "Elena," I began, and my voice was steadier than it had been in months. "You are a wonderful woman. You are full of life and light, and you deserve a man who is looking for the sun." I paused, letting the words land gently. "But I am not that man. My house is not empty, you see. It's full. It's full of 50 years of a life so complete that there is no room left to build another. What you are offering is a gift, but it is a gift I cannot accept without breaking the most sacred thing I have left. This isn't about you. It is about me finally understanding that I am not waiting for a new life to begin. I am living in the one I made, and I have to honor it. I have to protect it." Her smile faded, not into anger, but into a quiet, sad understanding. And when she left, the silence that filled the space she occupied wasn't lonely. It was mine. The phone call with Sarah was the storm I knew was coming. Her voice was tight with a disappointment that felt like a physical blow. "Dad, Elena called me. She's heartbroken. What happened? I thought you were happy." I took a deep breath, the scent of old wood and dust in my study grounding me. "I am happy, my dear," I said, my voice calm. "But my happiness doesn't look the way you want it to. For months, I have tried to live the life you all imagined for me, and I have felt myself disappearing, a little more each day." I could hear her start to protest, but I continued gently. "Your love is a beautiful, powerful thing, but it became a cage. You are not afraid for me, Sarah. You are afraid of my life. You see a quiet old man, and it reflects your own fears about being alone. You tried to fill my silence because you couldn't bear to listen to it. I am not giving up. I am finally, completely holding on. I am holding on to myself." The line was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, I knew our relationship had changed. I was no longer their project. I was just their father. That evening, I walked through my house, and it felt different. It was as if I had been a guest here for months, and now, finally, I was home. I ran my hand over the worn fabric of my armchair, the one shaped to my body, not to a visitor's. I went down to my workshop and picked up a piece of cedar, its scent sharp and clean, a smell of beginning. The world my children had tried to build for me had been dismantled, and what was left was my own. The next morning, for the first time in weeks, I made only 1 cup of coffee. I sat at the table in the quiet morning light and warmed my hands on the single mug. The silence was not an absence of sound. It was a presence. It was the presence of every memory, every love, every version of myself that had ever lived in these walls, and it was the profound, unshakable presence of the man I am now. I understood then that my life was not an unfinished story. It was a complete volume. And my final great love was not with a person, but with the peace of finally being able to read it. Choosing to be alone wasn't an act of surrender. It was the final, most important act of honoring the great love of my life. I am not preserving an absence. I am protecting a presence. In protecting the integrity of our 50 years, I am protecting the man she helped me become. My children, they are slowly beginning to understand. Their calls are different now, less about fixing me and more about knowing me. They ask about my day, about the bird I am carving, and they listen to the silence on my end of the line without trying to fill it. They are learning that my peace is not a symptom of my decline, but the very foundation of my strength. In this quiet house, surrounded by the ghosts of a beautiful life, I have found a companionship more profound than any new voice could offer. It is the companionship of my own history, of a love that has transcended time, and of the man I have finally fully become. You will spend your life being told that a full heart requires a partner, that silence is a void to be filled, and that an empty chair is a tragedy. But a life, if lived with enough love, can become a complete universe unto itself. You earn the right to simply inhabit it. Do not let the good intentions of others become the architects of your soul. Do not let their fear of your solitude dictate the terms of your peace. The final chapter is yours alone to write, and its beauty may not be in a new beginning, but in the quiet, dignified appreciation of the story that has already been told. The greatest act of love you may ever commit is to protect the person you have become. So I ask you, when the world grows quiet around you, will you have the courage to listen to what is there, instead of rushing to fill it with what is not?